All right, I believe we are live. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us virtually in the Heart and Hustle studio right here in my home in Meadowview. We are live right now on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And I really just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you so much for joining us for this 30-minute lunch 30-minute hour from your home, your office, wherever you're at. I hope all of you who are watching and tuning in had a restful holiday weekend and are staying healthy and safe. Before we begin our monthly live chat, I like to open our virtual event with a land acknowledgement. To the original people of this land, the Nisenan people, the Southern Maidu Valley and Plains Miwok, Patwin and Wintu peoples, and the people of Walta and Rancheria, Sacramento's only federally recognized tribe, may we acknowledge and honor the Native people who came before us and still walk beside us today on these ancestral lands by choosing to gather today in the active practice of acknowledgement and appreciation for Sacramento's Indigenous peoples, history, contributions, and lives. Again, thank you so much for joining me and two of our esteemed guests today for our monthly live chat. Today is Monday, as you all know, and it's the last Monday of November. And this month, as many of you may have known, it's also Diabetes Awareness, and I'm going to call it Diabetes Action Month. While there's a lot of scientific community information, a lot of strides that we've made over the past several decades around diabetes to help patients and residents manage their symptoms. I know, and many of us know, that too many of our loved ones in South Sacramento and our city is still having the daily health challenges. Many of you probably know someone or a loved one who is struggling, who's managing their blood sugar levels, have long-term health implications, and are just really frustrated with their kind of daily challenges, right? And so today's live chat, this month's live chat, we really wanted to dedicate it to really talking about this issue about diabetes in our communities and how we can really begin to bring awareness, but also action. And to help residents in the South area really begin to prevent, treat, and manage this disease. I'm really, really honored to have two amazing women of color physicians from the South area present today to actually join us to give us more insight about diabetes in our community. And again, really what we can do to prevent, treat, and manage this disease. So we have Dr. Candace Lawson joining us today and also Dr. Kristen Gates. Just a little bit, they're going to get an opportunity to introduce themselves, but I would like to kind of just read a little bit about their bios so that you who are all watching in can learn a little bit more about them. So Dr. Candace Lawson is the Chief Medical Officer for Methodist Hospital, which is actually located in District 8. Dr. Lawson is a family medicine doctor in Sacramento, California. And she's also affiliated with multiple hospitals in the area, including Mercy General, Methodist, and she actually received her medical degree from the University of California, Davis, so very close here to home. It has been in practice for more than 20 years. And Dr. Kristen Gates, was so honored to have her with us today from Kaiser Permanente. Dr. Gates is a healthcare provider primarily located in the South Sacramento and Elk Grove area. She has over 11 years of experience, and her specialties include family medicine, internal medicine. Interesting fact, she also speaks three different languages: Portuguese, Spanish, and English. And she received her medical degree from George Washington School of Medicine. And again, I'm just so honored to be in virtual space with two amazing public servants, bright, strong women of color that's doing everything they can to make sure that our families are thriving in the South area. And so, Dr. Lawson and Dr. Gates, thank you so much for your heart and hustle, and thank you so much for joining us. And so, I'll just go ahead and jump right in because I know we got 30 minutes and folks are eating their lunch and they want to learn a little bit more about both of you and a little bit more about the topic that we're going to talk about today. So, if you can please share a little bit about yourself, your journey of how you got here today, your name, your title, and your preferred pronouns, which we also listed underneath your screen. But if you can just share a little bit with us, that would be great. I'll start with Dr. Lawson.
Thank you so much, Council Member. I'm so excited to be here today. As we were discussing, let me tell you a little bit about myself and my journey. And then I'll tell you why I'm excited to be here to talk about diabetes. But as you mentioned, I trained locally here. The thing that I don't share as often is that, I grew up in the 70s. We'll just pretend, don't do too much math there to try to figure out my age. But I grew up in the 70s and I watched an entire generation of people, including my own parents, get ravaged by complications from chronic illness. And the things that we know about this is that a lot of these complications, they can be prevented. About 34 million people in this country have diabetes. So in a country of over 350 million, that puts that rate around 10%. And in the state of California, there are about 3 million people with diabetes. So that means, just as you said, council member, either you have diabetes or you know someone who's struggling with it. So our goal today, and I know that I speak for you and for Dr. Gates, is to help we want to put you in the driver's seat so that you don't have to be afraid of the disease, afraid of the complications. There is help. There's much that can be done. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Lawson. Dr. Gates.
So again, such a pleasure to be with you guys this afternoon. My name is Dr. Kristen Gates, her and she for pronouns. I won't dive into too much more. I think the only thing that I will just say that it's a pleasure to live in California. I have lived all over. I am from Chicago originally, did my undergrad at Xavier in New Orleans before med school in DC, residency in Connecticut. So this was the only coast I hadn't been. So I will say that when I first came and I had coworkers who were giving me blackberries from their backyard, I had no idea what kind of state I ended up. That is not something that happens in the Midwest. So I think that just to speak to what Dr. Lawson is saying as well, is just that I think that we also have a unique opportunity living in Sacramento, the farm to fork capital of the country, that we really can take great control of our health, and we're just trying to be here to enable that conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gates. Really appreciate it. And thank you for letting us know a little bit about just where you've been throughout your journey. And I'm so happy that you're here in the Sacramento region with us, rightfully where you belong, with us, with our community. So that's so great. So my first question for both of you is, in your line of work, what are some of the most common misconceptions about diabetes that you like for our community members to know, including even medication to lifestyle changes? So why don't I start with Dr. Gates on this one?
So I think one of the most common misconceptions is the fact that people feel like because the other family members in their life have had it, that they're doomed to have it as well. And that people think that it's a genetic predisposition. But there are, things that I tell my patients all the time, things that I say in leading some of these efforts here locally, is I tell my patients there are two things we pass down: our genes and our recipes. And so sometimes what we're seeing happen across families are not because they're genetically predisposed, but because they're eating the same things. And so people just often feel a sense of hopelessness about a disease that's so preventable, really, with change in lifestyle. And so I think that's the biggest misconception, is that there is a level of powerlessness that is just destiny or fate, when it really is about us changing certain lifestyle behaviors.
I love that. I love that so much, Dr. Gates. I mean, the fact that you talked about genes and recipe, and it's really about changing your lifestyle. That's really, I'm going to keep that in my Rolodex when we talk about health in our community, because oftentimes many folks of color, especially low-income communities of color, do feel a sense of hopelessness, thinking it's generation to generation. But we also have agency, and power, really, to the food that we put in, what we can do in terms of healthy lifestyle. So really appreciate you talking about the genes and the recipe piece, right? So thank you so much. Dr. Lawson?
Yeah, I think in addition to what Dr. Gates has said, for me, the biggest misconception is that medicine is bad. And I know that some of this thinking is rooted in sort of distrust of Western medicine, distrust of pharmaceutical industry. I understand and respect all of that. However, I think it's important for us to interrogate this and really have some question ourselves about, yeah, medicine, okay, but what about the disease? The disease is bad too. And so if we want to get in that driver's seat, if we want to be in control, we need to understand the power of medication, that it really can help to get your disease under control. Because at the end of the day, that's what matters. If you want to avoid those complications, if you want to avoid foot amputations, hemodialysis, blindness, infections that won't heal, all of these problems that come from not controlling the disease, we have to find a way to control it. And so for some, I think that will mean making peace with the medication, because it is so powerful and has such potential to help people. Back when I was early in my training, we had so little. We only had insulin and just a few oral medications. Now we've got 6 classes of oral medications, some of which I acknowledge are very expensive, and we've got lots of different kinds of insulin. And so the odds are that you can find something that can help you to control your disease. Those odds are pretty good. Now, that doesn't mean that we ignore diet and exercise. These things all work together. And even for people who are interested in some of the complementary therapies, I would be wary of anything on the internet that says that it can cure your diabetes. I would be nervous about that. But some complementary treatments can work with your diet, with exercise, with your medication.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lawson. Really, really, really appreciate that insight on the preventative piece. As we talk about diabetes, I know that there are, or I understand that there are a few types of diabetes out there. My question to both of you, for those that are tuning in, perhaps that know loved ones that have diabetes, really want to start with just some common language and foundation so that we understand what diabetes is. And so, I understand there are a few types of diabetes out there, but how will we know if we have either of the types? What are some of the early signs that folks should look out for? And I will start with Dr. Lawson on this one.
All right, there are 2 broad categories. There's type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Interestingly, probably about 90 to 95% of people affected with diabetes, they have type 2. Type 1 tends to be an earlier onset. Type 1 diabetics don't produce insulin, or not enough for them to live without supplementing. Type 2 diabetics have something called insulin resistance. They have insulin, maybe they don't have enough or it doesn't work well. And we think that insulin resistance comes about as a consequence of too much carbohydrate. And just to use some common terms, our diets now, if you think about the old food pyramid, do you guys remember what the old food pyramid used to look like? At the bottom, it was all those carbohydrates, the breads, rice, pasta, all the delicious things that our hearts yearn for and our tummies yearn for. But we used to recommend for people to eat a lot of these kinds of foods. And now we understand that probably is not good for us. It may contribute to us gaining weight, and gaining weight may contribute to us developing diabetes. So I hope that answers that. I hope it's not too confusing, but basically type 1, type 2 diabetes.
Awesome. Thanks, Dr. Lawson. Dr. Gates, do you have anything to add to that?
The only thing that I would add, and I think we have this perspective as both being family medicine doctors by training, is that, I joke, even though I literally just left an exam room and said this, I was like, I'm not that old, y'all. But when I was in medical school, they used to call type 1 diabetes juvenile diabetes, because you used to only see it in kids. Now we see type 2 diabetes in our teenagers. I've diagnosed an 18-year-old with type 2 diabetes. And, a lot of the component, in addition to everything that Dr. Lawson is saying about diet, we're really seeing this affect our communities in the way that exercise is not being as present and as ingrained in our lifestyle. Because now, kids play looks like adults work, meaning like you're sitting down in front of a screen, right? So you're starting to see adult problems in children. And so this really just starts to emphasize, how almost intentionally even countercultural that we have to be. I have a 2.5-year-old, so I'm already like thinking like you have to intentionally make sure that there's this physical activity that not just she's doing, that I'm doing, that so much of that is because we're able to live and accomplish so many of our daily tasks and even our daily entertainment without physical activity. And that really has been a significant change that we've seen even within the last few decades.
Thanks, Dr. Gates. Really, really appreciate that insight and really talking about how diabetes really impact the spectrum of folks, not just folks older, or in their 40s and 30s, but we're talking about young people as well. I know we have one more questions about resources, but definitely want to throw a really nice curveball question to both of you really quick. Really want to talk about just the prevention piece, and both of you just speaking from your lived experience about, before we talked about community resources that's available, what can we do as individuals, as South Sacramentans, really to ensure that we're preventing diabetes for ourselves and our families? What are some just recommendations that you have for folks who are watching right now? And I'll start with Dr. Gates.
So, I think probably the biggest thing, and this is something that even I'm coming to understand in my own health journeys, I'm working on my certification in lifestyle medicine. So some of this has been things I didn't get in my primary training that I'm getting now that I'm trying to work on that certification. And I say it simply understanding the chasm between what's normal and what's natural. So I tell my patients, a lot of my patients compare themselves to what's normal. Right? They're like, I'm not eating fast food. I'm not eating out a lot. Like I feel like I'm doing pretty good. But I tell them, like, if we think about what's natural, a grocery store is not natural. Like that's the chasm where we're at, right? Like it's not natural to not do manual labor to eat, to not pull something out of the ground, chop something down. And in a natural environment, the predominance of your diet would be plants, because that would be the easiest thing that you would have access to. And so I think that the biggest thing is understanding that health is very different than maybe some of our college classes or a court of law. There is no curve, there is no jury. So even if your reasons are reasonable and logical, your body is still functioning according to natural laws, not normal ones, right? So that I usually give my patients the analogy, like if you put a lion in the zoo, it doesn't lose its genetic makeup to hunt, even though it no longer needs to. So even though we have made all of these technological advances, we haven't lost our natural need for having a predominantly plant-based diet. And I think once people have an understanding about what their real goals for health should be, it drastically changes, the thought process that they've done enough, right? And it is not that we have to get there overnight, but you can't reach a goal you're not aiming for.
Thanks, Dr. Gates. That's really super, super insightful. And also makes me think a lot about, as individuals, what is our own personal health journey, right? The type of foods we eat, even culturally, right? We come from different cultures, the type of food that we eat, the type of lifestyle, right? And so really having a reflection of the type of health that you want, the kind of life that you want to lead, and what are your own personal health goals, which might just be another virtual live, chat as well. That's like another conversation. But I think, for us to really do that reflection and to ask ourselves, what are some personal health goals that we have for ourselves, especially we're entering the new year, right? So thank you so much, Dr. Gates, for that. Dr. Lawson?
Same thing. Eat more vegetables. My 2 pieces of advice, the diet piece, eat more vegetables. Across all of our cultures, there's beautiful vegetables that we can eat. We've just got to do that. We've got to push some of our starch aside on the plate. You can still have it, just less of it, and try to pick quality versions of it. But eat more vegetables. And after this pandemic has kept us all locked in for 2 years, we've all got to exercise more now. So that means taking the stairs more often, parking a little bit further away when we go out to do our shopping. Deliberately, leave something in a room so that you can go back and pick it up. Just all those little steps that you take throughout the day can really make a difference in your exercise level. I'll tell you, in my clinical practice, there are very few circumstances where people cannot exercise. Yes, I understand if you live in a scary neighborhood where you can't go outside, exercise inside. You can always, if you watch television, watch, but maybe get up and move around, do some jumping jacks on the commercials. If you can't stand up and exercise, sit and exercise. Move your arms. There are just all kinds of ways for us to be active that we've all got to do it. So again, because we've all been inactive, I think when we look back on this pandemic and see just the impact for all of us, how much, the weight gain, and I don't know what impact this is going to have on our hearts, all of this inactivity, but it's time for us to get up and get moving.
I love that. Get up and get moving. I know that for our office in particular, every Mondays we do our walks with our seniors at the Pinnell Community Center. So I'm always walking with our seniors, and we're always talking about how it's one step to a healthier life. And so, join us on Mondays as well. We do that Mondays at 9:00. It's Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 9:00 at the Pinnell Community Center. So just want to put a little plug on that, especially if you live in the area. Come join us to walk in the neighborhood. So I have one last question left, and this is really about resources just in the community. So, for those living with diabetes, often struggling, they have to choose between their medication or their living expenses. Can you share with us just what kind of resources are out there that's available to our community for those that have diabetes and those that maybe don't have it but want, some information on it so they can provide it to loved ones? We will start with Dr. Lawson.
Yeah, I think it's really sad that we even have to have this conversation at council member. It just, in a country with as much wealth as we have, that anybody has to make a choice between living expenses and medication really makes me very sad. Having said that, there are some options. There are online coupons, even in our hospital, when we're discharging patients with limited incomes and limited insurance. We do use GoodRx. That is a wonderful resource to help people get medications a little bit cheaper. And sometimes, even if you just appeal directly to your pharmacy that you use, they can help you find more reasonably priced alternatives. There are nonprofit assistance programs. Oftentimes, if you mail in your medication, the prescription, mail in is cheaper if you can get a 90-day supply. Oftentimes, that's helpful as well. And so those would be my suggestions.
Thank you, Dr. Lawson. Dr. Gates?
So I do, so the ones that I know the most about are the ones that we have at Kaiser. So in the pandemic, we created something called Thrive Local that connects our Kaiser members to community resources, specifically about food, transportation, and certain health concerns. So, transparently in the day-to-day action of a physician, a lot of that knowledge ends up being more with our team who kind of works on like a social work level. So in full disclosure, it tends to not be as clear my level of expertise. But I will say that for my patients who have been using certain resources, Meals on Wheels has been one that has been helpful. But also, the greatest thing I think about living where we live is the access about fresh produce. And so going to farmers markets, I've noticed that the cost of produce going to a farmer's market is like I get a much larger amount for much cheaper than from the grocery store. And we have again, I'm talking just locally here at Elk Grove, Bighorn, which is the office that I'm at outside of the Sprouts here off of Bighorn. There's a farmer's market every Saturday, and that's from 8 to 12. So that ends up being kind of like some of the resources that I know of. But again, to Dr. Lawson's point, there are, in addition to GoodRx, some of the most common meds we use, like metformin, glipizide, are on the $4 list at Walmart. And so sometimes it also is the consumer kind of looking and the patient about where they fill the meds. Sometimes it's cheaper at another pharmacy. But I think the most important thing for us as physicians is that if you can't afford your medications, that's something that we should know so that we can kind of work on it. I think that the biggest thing is that there ends up being a silence, right? Mm-hmm. So that we just see that the patient hasn't taken it, but we don't know why. And so then when we don't know why, then the suggestions that we're making may not make any sense, right? And so if it's a cost issue, us being aware of it and having that honest conversation with your physician, I think is what empowers us to be in position to try and help. And I definitely have worked with patients using like the $4 list medication regimen in the past. Not something as often, being a Kaiser physician in full disclosure, right? But I used to work at a community health center in Connecticut before practicing here. So I'm familiar with when you need to find resources, how to piece that together. So just for all of your constituents, letting us know empowers us to be the patient's advocate to the best of our ability.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gates, and really just sharing your own lived experience as someone who works with so many of just your patient, but just residents during your journey as a physician. Dr. Lawson, Dr. Gates, I know we're a little bit over 12:30. I know we're supposed to end at 12:30. So I really want to take this opportunity to thank you both just for being on the front lines and doing everything you can to ensure that our families in South Sacramento are safe, are healthy, and that they're thriving. And so thank you so much for joining us. If folks are tuning in, just to let you all know, today was our monthly live chat, and the topic today was really around diabetes, awareness, and action. And so if you're tuning in right now, as soon as we end, you can actually go back and watch it again. But we really just want to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Lawson and Dr. Gates for joining us for this live chat. I do at this time want to just wrap up and conclude our live chat for today. I just wanted to do some quick announcements. We have a new community calendar, and you can check out what's happening in South Sacramento if you go to this website, talkify.com/CM MyVang. So the site is right there. That's TOCKIFY.com/CMM AIVANG. And then also, if you want to get updates on what's happening in District 8, you can follow us on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. We have the same handle. That's at CMMyVang. If you use that handle, it is the same for Twitter, for Facebook, for Instagram. So you can follow us there and get live updates. Also, you can also just contact us the old school way. You can pick up your phone and call us at 916-808-7008 if you have any questions, comments, need support in terms of any city services. Please don't hesitate to call us, or you can email us at district8@cityofsacramento.org. And I think I've already mentioned the social media piece. So again, thank you so much, everyone. Looking forward to seeing you all next month for our next live chat. Until then, have a safe and healthy week, everyone. And if I don't see you before the holidays, I'm sure I'll see all of you before the holidays. If you're watching this, I do want to wish all of you a happy holidays. We do plan to have one more live chat before 2023. Stay tuned for that, for information regarding that. But if I don't see you all virtually or in person, definitely want to take the opportunity to say happy holidays. Be in touch soon. Bye, everyone.